Certainly. I'll translate the story into English with American names and locations while maintaining the original length and structure. I'll continue until I reach the output limit, at which point you can prompt me to continue. Here's the beginning of the translated story. A messenger pigeon unexpectedly appears beside a young woman. It carried in its claws an enigmatic wallet full of money. Its surprising behavior left everyone in shock. Before you learn about this fascinating story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The morning sun had barely risen when Sarah opened the doors of the pet shop, Paw Pals. The small establishment on Maple Street had been her refuge for 5 years, where she dedicated her days to the animals she loved so much. As she arranged the window display with the latest dog toys, a flutter of wings caught her attention. A white pigeon, with impeccable plumage and a distinctive bearing, gracefully landed on the counter. Sarah immediately noticed there was something special about this bird. Its eyes were lively and intelligent, and its movements were too precise for an ordinary pigeon. Before she could process the situation, the bird released something it was carrying in its beak, a brown leather wallet, apparently new. "Hey, little one, what do you have there?" Sarah approached cautiously, wary of frightening the unexpected visitor. To her surprise, the pigeon didn't move, remaining serene as she picked up the wallet. Upon opening the object, Sarah felt her heart race. Inside was a considerable amount of money, almost $1,000 in neatly organized bills, along with personal documents. The name on the ID was John Thompson, with an address on a nearby street. "My God, this is a lot of money," exclaimed Sarah, looking alternately at the wallet and the pigeon, which remained there as if waiting for her next actions. At that moment, Mrs. Johnson, the florist from the shop next door, rushed into the pet shop. "Sarah, you won't believe it. John from the butcher shop is desperate. He lost his wallet with all the money he was going to use to buy his new motorcycle. He's turning the neighborhood upside down looking for it." Sarah looked again at the pigeon, which was now preening its feathers with its beak, apparently satisfied with itself. "Mrs. Johnson, I think we've found his wallet. Or rather, this little one here found it." The news spread quickly through the neighborhood, and within minutes John arrived at the pet shop breathless. His face was red and sweaty, reflecting hours of desperate searching. When Sarah handed him the wallet, his eyes welled up as he found everything intact. "I don't even know how to thank you," exclaimed John, checking the contents with trembling hands. "But how?" Sarah pointed to the pigeon, which remained in the same place, observing the scene with apparent interest. "It was her who brought it. She landed here and delivered the wallet right on the counter." John approached the bird, amazed. The pigeon, showing surprising docility, allowed him to pet it. "I've never seen anything like it," he murmured, still processing what had happened. The rest of the morning was busy at the pet shop. The news of the pigeon that had returned a lost wallet attracted many curious onlookers. Everyone wanted to see the extraordinary bird, which came to be affectionately called Messenger by the neighborhood residents. Sarah provided water and birdseed for the special visitor, who seemed in no hurry to leave. There was something about that pigeon's behavior that intrigued everyone. Its posture was different, its movements were calculated, and its eyes seemed to assess each person who approached. John returned at the end of the workday with a special cage and various treats. "I want to take care of her if she agrees to stay," he explained. "It's the least I can do after what she did for me." Messenger, as if understanding every word, approached John with delicate steps on the counter. Sarah smiled, realizing that this was just the beginning of an extraordinary story that would transform everyone's lives in the neighborhood. What no one knew yet was that this simple demonstration of honesty and intelligence from the pigeon was just the tip of a much greater mystery, which would begin to unfold in the following days, involving not only John and Sarah, but the entire community in a surprising plot. In the days that followed, John's butcher shop became a local attraction. Messenger adapted quickly to her new routine, remaining free to fly but always returning to the special perch that John had installed near the counter. Customers were enchanted by her majestic presence and peculiar behavior. One morning, while John was organizing the spice shelves, he noticed something unusual in the pigeon's behavior. She was agitated, flying in circles and making sounds different from her usual ones. Suddenly, she darted out the door, leaving everyone surprised by her sudden departure. Will she not come back? John wondered aloud, feeling a tightness in his chest. But before he could worry more, Messenger returned, this time carrying an old military medal. The object, although worn by time, still maintained its characteristic shine. On the surface, a partially erased inscription suggested an important commendation. John examined the medal with curiosity, realizing there was more to this pigeon than he had imagined. Sarah, who visited the butcher shop daily to see Messenger, was intrigued by the discovery. "John, this isn't an ordinary medal. Look at the symbol here. It seems to be from the Military Intelligence Service." The news of the medal spread quickly through the neighborhood, attracting the attention of Mr. Wilson, a retired gentleman who lived 2 streets up. Upon seeing the medal, his eyes lit up with recognition. "That medal. I knew someone who had one just like it," he commented, adjusting his glasses to examine the object better. "A friend of mine, Colonel Stevens, worked with carrier pigeons in the army. He trained dozens of them for special missions." John and Sarah exchanged meaningful looks. "Do you still have contact with this colonel?" Sarah asked anxiously. Mr. Wilson shook his head negatively. "Unfortunately not. He fell seriously ill a few years ago and had to move to another state for treatment. I never heard from him again." Messenger, who was attentively observing the conversation, approached the medal and gently touched it with her beak. Her behavior suggested a deep connection with that object and possibly with her military past. That afternoon, something even more extraordinary happened. An elderly lady entered the butcher shop, leaning on her cane, looking for ground beef. Upon seeing Messenger, she let out an exclamation of surprise. "That pigeon, does it have a specific mark on its right wing?" she asked, approaching with difficulty. John confirmed, showing the small star-shaped mark that everyone had already noticed, but never understood its significance. "My God, that's Aurora!" exclaimed the lady with tears in her eyes. "That's what Robert called her." She was his best messenger, responsible for delivering crucial documents during important operations. The revelation caused a commotion among those present. Aurora, now they knew her true name, seemed to react to the sound of her old designation, moving in a more animated way. "Colonel Stevens was devastated when she disappeared during his illness," continued the lady. "He always said she was special, different from all the others he trained." Sarah, who continued visiting the butcher shop daily, began researching military carrier pigeons. She discovered that these animals were trained not only to deliver messages, but also to identify specific objects and perform complex missions. "This explains how she found your wallet, John," concluded Sarah. "She must have been trained to recognize and recover important objects." The story of Aurora, the military pigeon who now protected the neighborhood, began to gain new chapters. Each day brought a different discovery about her abilities and her extraordinary past. John's butcher shop transformed into a meeting point where people shared stories and theories about the mysterious messenger. What no one imagined was that Aurora still held many secrets, and her presence in the neighborhood was no mere coincidence. A larger plot was beginning to unfold, connecting past and present in surprising ways. The discovery of the military pigeon's true identity brought a new dynamic to the neighborhood. Aurora, as everyone now called her, continued her private missions of finding lost objects, but there was something more in her behavior that intrigued Sarah. During her visits to the butcher shop, the young woman began to notice that Aurora reacted peculiarly whenever she heard conversations about military personnel or when someone mentioned hospitals. Her attentive eyes and altered posture suggested that she understood more than she appeared to. On a particularly busy afternoon, while John was attending to his customers, Aurora began to show unusual agitation. She flew from one side to the other, emitting sounds different from her usual ones. Suddenly she darted out the door, leaving everyone apprehensive. "She always comes back," John reassured, though his voice betrayed a hint of concern. 2 hours passed without a sign of the pigeon. Sarah, who was at the pet shop, decided to close early and help John in the search. As they walked through the neighborhood streets, they met Mrs. Johnson, who brought surprising news. "You won't believe it!" exclaimed the florist out of breath. "I saw Aurora flying over St. Francis Hospital, the one that's been closed for renovation for years. She was going in and out through a broken window on the 3rd floor." John and Sarah looked at each other, intrigued. St. Francis Hospital had been an important military medical center before it was deactivated. Coincidence or not, That information seemed significant. Arriving at the location, they found Aurora perched on a windowsill. She was holding something in her beak, a small blue-covered notebook worn by time. Upon seeing John and Sarah, she flew in their direction, delivering the object to them. "It's a diary," whispered Sarah, carefully leafing through the yellowed pages. "It belongs to Colonel Stevens." The notes revealed fascinating details about the military Pigeon training program. Aurora wasn't a simple messenger. She was part of a special project called Wings of Wisdom, where pigeons were trained for highly complex missions. "Look at this," John pointed to a specific passage. Aurora was considered the most intelligent in the program. She not only delivered messages, but was also capable of recognizing patterns and making independent decisions. As they read, they discovered that Colonel Stevens had developed a special bond with Aurora. He considered her more than a trained pigeon. She was his companion, his confidant during long nights of work at the military hospital. The diary also mentioned a secret project, something the colonel called the Guardian Protocol. The notes were vague, but suggested that Aurora had been trained for a specific mission, something related to the protection of important information. "Look at this date," Sarah pointed to one of the last entries. "It's from 3 years ago, shortly before the colonel fell ill. He wrote that he entrusted something special to Aurora, something she should protect." The pigeon, who was attentively observing the reading of the diary, began to gently peck at one of the pages. In the margin there was a small drawing that looked like a map, with specific markings in the neighborhood. "I think she's trying to show us something," said Sarah, studying the drawing carefully. "These marked points. One of them is exactly where you found your wallet, John." The discovery of the diary opened a new chapter in Aurora's story. It wasn't just a coincidence that she had chosen that neighborhood. There was a greater purpose in her presence there. Colonel Stevens, even though absent, had left clues that only his faithful messenger could reveal. John decided to keep the diary in his butcher shop, along with the medal found earlier. Aurora seemed to approve of the decision, perching close to the objects with a protective posture. At night, when the butcher shop was already closed, Sarah stayed extra time, making notes about all the day's discoveries. She observed Aurora, who was resting peacefully on her perch, and couldn't help but think that they were just beginning to unravel the mysteries surrounding this extraordinary bird. What they still didn't know was that the Guardian Protocol mentioned in the diary was about to reveal itself, bringing with it revelations that would forever change the lives of everyone involved in this story. The days following the discovery of Colonel Stevens's diary were of intense investigation for Sarah and John. The butcher shop became an improvised operations center, where the two spent hours studying the notes and trying to decipher the enigmatic Guardian Protocol. Aurora, for her part, seemed more alert than ever. Her flights around the neighborhood became more frequent and systematic, as if she were patrolling the area. John noticed that she always returned with small objects, a military button here, a piece of paper there, as if she were assembling an invisible puzzle. On a particularly hot afternoon, while they were organizing the last pieces of information they had collected, an unexpected visit changed the course of the investigation. A tall man, with a military bearing and graying hair, entered the butcher shop, his eyes immediately fixed on Aurora. "So it's true," he said with a choked voice. "She really is here." John and Sarah looked at each other, surprised. The man introduced himself as Major Anderson, an old colleague of Colonel Stevens. "I came as soon as I heard the rumors about a military pigeon in this neighborhood," he explained, cautiously approaching Aurora, who was watching him curiously. "But I never imagined it would really be our Aurora." Major Anderson began to tell about Colonel Stevens' last days in active service. He knew he was getting sick, but there was something that worried him more than his own health. Robert constantly talked about a legacy that he needed to protect, something related to the Wings of Wisdom project. Sarah, feeling they were about to unravel part of the mystery, decided to show the diary to the Major. As he leafed through the pages, the military man's eyes widened. "This explains a lot," he murmured. "The Guardian Protocol, it was Robert's contingency plan. He must have trained Aurora to protect crucial information in case something happened to him." John, who had been listening attentively until then, intervened. But what kind of information would be so important as to entrust it to a pigeon? Major Anderson hesitated for a moment before answering. The Wings of Wisdom project wasn't just about training pigeons for messages. It was an advanced research program in animal-human communication. Robert believed he had discovered something revolutionary, something that could change the way we understand animal intelligence. At that moment, Aurora began to become agitated, flying towards a high shelf in the butcher shop. With her beak, she skillfully removed a small loose piece from the wood paneling, revealing a secret compartment. Everyone watched in astonishment as the pigeon removed a small electronic device, no larger than a thumb drive, from there. "Unbelievable," whispered Major Anderson. "She kept this all this time waiting for the right moment." Sarah carefully picked up the device. "What do you think is in here?" "Probably all the data from Colonel Stevens's research," replied the Major. "Years of work, discoveries that could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies communication." The atmosphere in the butcher shop became charged with expectation. They had found the central piece of the puzzle, but there were still many unanswered questions. Why had Aurora chosen that moment to reveal the hiding place? And more importantly, what should they do with that information? John, feeling the weight of responsibility, was the first to speak. "We need to understand better what's going on before making any decision. Major, could you help us decipher this information?" Major Anderson nodded gravely. "Yes, but we need to be cautious. If this information falls into the wrong hands, the consequences could be serious." Sarah, always practical, suggested, "We can use the computer in my store. It's safer than doing it here, where any customer can walk in." As they prepared to leave, Aurora landed on John's shoulder, as if she wanted to accompany them. Her gaze seemed to say that her mission was far from over. The group left the butcher shop with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They were about to unravel a secret kept for years, protected by an unlikely winged guardian. What they would find in that small device could change not only their lives, but potentially humanity's understanding of animal intelligence. As they walked towards Sarah's pet shop, none of them realized they were being watched. A shadowy figure followed them at a distance, equally interested in the secret that Aurora had guarded for so long. Sarah's pet shop, normally a place of joy and lively sounds, was enveloped in a tense silence. John, Sarah, and Major Anderson clustered around the computer, while Aurora observed attentively from the makeshift perch that Sarah had prepared. "It's encrypted," muttered the Major, after several attempts to access the device's content. Robert was always cautious, but this is a level of security I've never seen before. Sarah bit her lip, thoughtful. What if the key is somehow related to Aurora? After all, she was the guardian of this. As if understanding the conversation, Aurora let out a soft coo and flew to the computer keyboard. With surprising precision, she pecked a specific sequence of keys. "Impossible," whispered the Major as the computer screen flickered, indicating that access had been granted. An avalanche of information began to unfold before them. Graphs, reports, and videos, all detailing the advances of the Wings of Wisdom project. The discoveries were revolutionary. Methods to amplify animals' cognitive capacity, advanced interspecies communication techniques, and, most surprisingly, evidence that some species, like pigeons, possessed cognitive abilities far beyond what was believed possible. "This is unbelievable," John stammered, scanning the documents. Colonel Stevens discovered a way to literally communicate with animals on a profound level. Major Anderson nodded gravely. "And now I understand why he was so concerned about protecting this information. In the wrong hands, this could be used for nefarious purposes." Sarah, who had been silent, absorbing everything, suddenly turned pale. "Wait, look at this." She pointed to a file titled Potential Threats. The file contained a list of individuals and organizations that Colonel Stevens believed were after his research. Among the names, one stood out: Dr. Nathan Mendez, a former colleague of Stevens who had been expelled from the program for unethical conduct. "I know that name," said the Major, frowning. "Mendez disappeared years ago, after being accused of conducting unauthorized experiments on animals." At that moment, a noise from the front of the store made everyone startle. Aurora immediately flew to the window, her behavior indicating imminent danger. John carefully peeked out and saw a suspicious-looking man trying to force entry. "I think we have trouble," he whispered. Major Anderson took control of the situation. "We need to get out of here now. "Sarah, is there any exit through the back?" Sarah nodded, quickly guiding them to a service door. As they escaped, they heard the sound of breaking glass. The intruder had managed to get in. Running through the neighborhood streets, the group split up. The Major stayed behind to mislead the pursuer, while John and Sarah, with Aurora flying just above, sought a safe place. "Where are we going?" Sarah panted, fear evident in her voice. John thought quickly. "The old abandoned warehouse near the river. No one will look for us there." As they ran, Aurora seemed to be guiding them, flying ahead and occasionally changing direction, as if checking if the path was safe. Reaching the warehouse, they hid among dusty boxes, trying to calm their rapid breathing. Aurora landed silently near them, her attentive eyes scanning the environment. "What do we do now?" Sarah whispered, adrenaline still running through her veins. John held her hand, trying to convey confidence. "We need to better understand what's going on. Who was that man? Why did he follow us?" At that moment, Aurora began to act strangely. She flew to a pile of old boxes and started pecking insistently at one of them. Intrigued, John and Sarah cautiously approached. Upon opening the box, they found something that made their hearts race even more. An old folder with a military seal, containing more documents about the Wings of Wisdom project. How did this end up here?" Sarah asked, leafing through the papers with trembling hands. The answer was about to be revealed, but a shadow at the entrance of the warehouse made them freeze. Someone had found them, and the answers they sought were about to come accompanied by a very real danger. John and Sarah's hearts seemed to want to leap out of their chests as they watched the shadow approach. Aurora, ever alert, positioned herself protectively between them and the figure entering the warehouse. To everyone's surprise, the person who emerged from the shadows wasn't the pursuer they feared, but a middle-aged woman with graying hair and piercing eyes. She stopped upon seeing the group, her eyes widening as she recognized Aurora. "It can't be," murmured the woman, her voice trembling slightly. "After all this time?" John was the first to recover his voice. "Who are you? How did you find us?" The woman took a step forward, her eyes never leaving Aurora. "My name is Dr. Emily Vasconcelos. I was part of the Wings of Wisdom project along with Robert." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Actually, I helped create Aurora." Sarah and John exchanged looks of astonishment. Aurora, for her part, seemed to recognize the newcomer, her behavior changing from defensive to curious. "But how did you know we would be here?" questioned Sarah, still distrustful. Emily smiled softly. "I didn't know. I come to this warehouse periodically to check if one day the information that Robert and I hid here would be found." She looked at the folder in Sarah's hands. "It seems that day has finally come." As Emily explained her connection to the project and to Colonel Stevens, the group began to relax. She revealed that, years ago, when they realized their research was attracting unwanted attention, she and Robert decided to hide crucial parts of their studies in different locations. "The warehouse was just one of the hiding places," explained Emily, "but the most important was with Aurora. Robert trained her to protect and eventually reveal the location of all the other hiding places, in case something happened to him." John, absorbing all the information, asked, "But why all this secrecy? Why not share these discoveries with the world?" Emily sighed deeply. "Because our discoveries go far beyond simple communication with animals. We found evidence that some species, like pigeons, possess capabilities that could be, let's say, militarized. Imagine an army of highly intelligent creatures capable of performing complex missions without being detected." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with the understanding of the implications of these revelations. Suddenly, Aurora became agitated, flying in circles and emitting alarm sounds. Seconds later, they heard footsteps approaching rapidly. "Quick, this way," whispered Emily, guiding them to a hidden trapdoor in the warehouse floor. They had barely hidden when the warehouse door opened violently. Through small cracks, they could see a man of severe appearance entering, followed by 2 bodyguards. "Dr. Mendes," whispered Emily, her face pale with recognition. The man walked through the warehouse, his eyes scanning every corner. "I know you're here," his voice echoed through the empty space. "All I want is the research. Hand it over, and no one gets hurt." John felt Sarah trembling beside him. Emily, however, remained calm, signaling for them to remain silent. Aurora, who had managed to escape outside before they closed the trapdoor, began a series of flight maneuvers, diverting the intruder's attention away from the hiding place. "That Pigeon!" exclaimed one of the bodyguards. "It must be the famous Aurora." Dr. Mendez smiled maliciously. "Excellent. Capture her. She's the key to all of this." What followed was a chaotic scene. Aurora, demonstrating surprising intelligence and agility, led the men out of the warehouse, allowing the group to emerge from their hiding place. "We have to help her," exclaimed John, but Emily held him back. "Trust her," said the scientist with a confident smile. "Aurora knows what she's doing. Now we need to ensure this information is safe." As they sneaked out of the warehouse, they heard in the distance the sound of approaching sirens. Major Anderson had managed to alert the authorities. Emily guided the group to a car parked nearby. "Come on, I know a place where we'll be safe and can decipher the rest of the information." As they drove away, they saw Aurora flying high in the sky, free and apparently unharmed. John couldn't help but feel a wave of admiration for the incredible bird. What they didn't know was that the journey was far from over. The revelations that awaited them would not only change their lives, but could redefine the relationship between humans and animals forever. Emily's car wound through back roads, moving farther and farther away from the city's bustle. John, Sarah, and Dr. Vasconcelos remained in tense silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts about recent events. After almost 2 hours of travel, they arrived at an isolated country house, surrounded by dense vegetation. "This is it," announced Emily, parking the vehicle. "This was Robert's secret refuge. No one but the two of us knew of this place's existence." As they entered the house, they were impressed by what they saw. What appeared to be a simple rural residence from the outside was actually a sophisticated laboratory inside. State-of-the-art computers, scientific equipment, and, most surprisingly, a huge aviary occupying an entire wing of the house. "Incredible," murmured Sarah, her eyes scanning the environment. Emily smiled, a mixture of pride and nostalgia in her gaze. "This is where we conducted our most advanced research, and it's here that we can finally decipher all the content of the device that Aurora protected for so long." While Emily worked on the computers, John and Sarah explored the aviary. They discovered that it housed various bird species, all apparently part of the Wings of Wisdom project. "Look!" exclaimed John, pointing to an open window high in the aviary. Aurora, as if guided by a sixth sense, was flying towards the opening, landing gracefully inside the enclosure. Aurora's reunion with her old home was emotional. Other birds approached, as if recognizing an old friend. It was evident that this was a special place, laden with memories and secrets. Back in the laboratory, Emily made a startling discovery. "You won't believe this," she said, her eyes fixed on the computer screen. "The device doesn't just contain research data. There's a video message from Robert himself." With racing hearts, the group gathered around the monitor. The image of Colonel Stevens, visibly debilitated, but with eyes bright with determination, filled the screen. "If you're seeing this," he began, "it means Aurora has successfully completed her final mission. First, I want to apologize for the mystery and the danger I may have put in your lives. But what we discovered is too big, too powerful to fall into the wrong hands." Stevens went on to explain that the Wings of Wisdom project had surpassed all initial expectations. They had not only managed to significantly increase the intelligence of certain bird species, but also discovered that some, like Aurora, possessed almost telepathic communication abilities. "Our greatest breakthrough," continued the Colonel, "was the discovery of a method to create a direct interface between the human brain and that of certain birds. Imagine being able to see through a bird's eyes, feel what it feels, communicate without words." The magnitude of this revelation left everyone stunned. The implications were enormous, both for scientific advancement and for possible military or intelligence applications. "But this power," warned Stevens, "in the wrong hands could be catastrophic. That's why I divided the information and hid it. Aurora was trained to gather all the pieces only when the time was right, and the right people were involved." The video ended with Stevens looking directly at the camera, as if he could see through time. "Emily, if you're there, you know what to do. To the others, trust her. And remember, Our goal has always been to use this knowledge for the good of humanity and animals. Don't let this become a weapon." When the screen darkened, a heavy silence fell over the group. The revelations were both wonderful and frightening. Emily was the first to break the silence. "Now you understand why we kept this secret for so long, but also why it's crucial that the right people know about this." John looked at Aurora, who had returned and was now watching them attentively. "What do we do now?" he asked. Emily smiled, a gleam of determination in her eyes. "Now, we complete Robert's work. We use this knowledge for good, as he always wanted. But first," she paused, looking at each of them, "we need to protect ourselves. Mendez and others like him are still out there, and they'll do anything to obtain this information." Sarah, who had been silent, finally spoke. "So this means our journey is just beginning?" Emily nodded. "Yes, and it will be a journey that can change the world as we know it." As the sun set outside, casting long shadows across the laboratory, the group began to plan their next steps. They knew the challenges ahead would be enormous, but with Aurora by their side and Colonel Stephen's legacy guiding them, they were ready to face whatever came. What they didn't know was that their greatest trial was yet to come, and that the fate of much more than just their lives was at stake.